I am basically an unemployable, and probably most people in this network are also unemployable. We really cannot be told by someone else what to do and how to do it and
Right.
stay on task, because we have a different brain structure. As you put us in a functional MRI, the back of our heads light up. We use our eyeballs, occipital lobe, to go through the world. And so we're highly visually acute. Byproduct of that is we have a hypofrontal lobe, and meaning underactive. And so rather than seeing the world as a series of sequential steps, we see the world as one big blob, as one big thing,
Mhm.
big picture thinkers. And so we're not looking at things as just one simple A to B to C. We see the whole alphabet, and we can see and draw lines between, why are you going A, B, C, D, E, F, G? Why not just jump B, C, and D and go straight to the, it's so much easier. We're incredible problem solvers. And so we really do have a different brain. And after writing Driven, and, it's been the Indian for 5 years, I doubled down just because of the imposter syndrome. I want to make sure I'm not talking out of my ass. And it is real. We really are different. Second biggest thing is our reward system. And so in 1991, when I was just entering grad school, the Time magazine article came out. Oh my God, we found the alcoholism gene. And that's dopamine receptor DRD2-A1 allele gene was the first kind of snippet and, linked to alcoholism. Within 3 to 5 years, it really clearly was gambling, was entrepreneurship, was pro athletes, was all over the map. And so what dopamine does, it's the reward chemical. So a guy named Kenneth Blum out of Texas called us reward deficient. We have a reward deficiency syndrome, according to all the farmers or the sheep. And so no matter what we do, it never quite feels like it was good enough, or it could always be better. And so it creates this loop of OCD, of perfectionism, of all of these pathologies, according to them. And it is this internal feeling of almost impending doom, like there's really something missing or wrong, and it's boredom. And think about farmers, if they felt boredom, they would wander away from the crops. We need to feel boredom so we get out of the caves and go hunt more. And so all of my work, and I've been working in addiction, really where I started 35 years now, golly, and it turns into, our brain structure plus this reward system deficiency, we have a different identity. So if you think about a, farmer with this left prefrontal, and it went from hunter-gatherer groups into these massive societies, their identities follow. They become butchers and bakers and candlestick makers, and they have a very simple, narrow identity of who they are and what they are. And, you look at us, we're nuts. Ask an entrepreneur, you want to make me send an entrepreneur to hell, ask them who they are. Because it is this weird conglomerate of identities of, and if you're starting a business and putting on 35 hats, that's awesome. But as you transition from, a lot of guys can attest to that, you transition from startup mode into a big farming organization, they kick us out. They fire us because we that's not what we are. Bigger product, and the addiction component of it is the most consistent thing in our worlds is this feeling of not enough. And so most of us wind up with this felt sense of identity rather than a logical identity. And that's where all of the addiction comes in. It feels like I'm not enough. It feels like there's something missing or wrong with me. And I could have called the book, the shame-based personality. It wouldn't have sold any. And so it is this real issue. Real issue. And I say it, candidly, I don't know the exact numbers, but at least half or 2/3 of us are just whacked off in our addictions. We've alcoholism or whatever it is, and it is, if not, we wind up owning 80% of the in the world because we are wired for hyper success. We're also wired for narcissism. And, that wiring for narcissism is a gift. It really is, because we feel this shadow. I'm very Jungian in my understanding of how we work, but this feeling of that there's something missing or wrong with me internally. And so I have to build this outer shell of, proving that I'm successful. And so as I was talking in the breakout groups, it is impossible for us to retire. I mean, we really have an issue with losing that external sense of identity. I worked in Navy Special Warfare with those guys, and the suicide rates of these, drivens coming out of combat and coming out of the external container of the military, they fall apart. And so I think that's a real issue. Most importantly is that we are in a farmer's world. This world is not designed by us, made for us, and we're incredibly important in it. But you go to a typical psychologist and they look at us, man, they'll label us sociopaths. I mean, we're all over the map. So
that, what's the difference between men and women? What is the makeup?
Yeah, my book number 2, if any of you guys read Driven, it's a very male-oriented book. Women, and that is in my heart now, and I'm working with the co-author, and she's truly authoring this book, is a driven woman. She was a Ohio State #1 pick for volleyball. She's 6'4". Driven women are near and dear to my heart. They have a much harder time than driven men. And it is, you talk about not fitting in, driven women do not fit into the typical, housewives and that crap. They just don't, it's just not them. But social demands and really trying to fit in is much more important to women than men. It really is. So yeah. The numbers, I'm not sure. I really don't know. I think there's a lot more driven women hiding than driven men.
Yeah, let me read this. I got it from, Crazy Perry Belcher, who I introduced you to, and he had gone through your book, and this is what first turned him on to this whole concept. So he has the hunter's brain and the farmer's brain. I want to see if this is accurate. And then, so let me first read the farmer's brain. Great students, team player, rule followers, nested and settled, slow and steady, calm and rested, on-directional, likes incremental improvement, low risk tolerance, easy to rest, sleeps well, because I know most of you just sleep like easy. Great with complex math, easily satisfied, organized and methodical, easily satisfied with everything. Bad students, big learners, solo performer, solo reward, gets it quick, skips homework, perfectionist, disorganized, nomadic, rolling stones, always tired, can never rest, high risk taker, new horizons, resilient, never gives up, bored with success but driven, hyper alert, multi-concepts, rapid deduction, bad at math, addictive personality, frustrated as hell, never fits in, never satisfied with anything. Do you relate to that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now, is that accurate, Doug?
It is. Part of my, the imposter syndrome, feeling like, I'm not an expert, has led me into, I actually spent about a year creating a driven assessment just to really take it apart about how different we are within the driven community. Most of those do fit, but, some people are very left hemisphere dominant. And if you're driven left hemisphere, you tend to go more OCD. If you're right hemisphere dominant, you're much more impulsive and fun, because I'm right hemisphere dominant. We're all a little different, but the underlying qualities of that, big picture thinking seem to fall out pretty consistently. The resilience that we have is one of the most consistent findings. We are incredibly resilient, even though we don't feel like it necessarily, meaning that we, this neuropeptide Y, which is a neurochemical I write about in my book, but it's, as a hunter, we're chasing a rabbit gets away, and we go, another rabbit. The moment we shift into the next thing, we can drop consequences almost immediately. Like, we get over stuff right now, and obvious benefit. And, that is where, the addiction cycle really falls into place, where you don't think about the consequences.